this video is about a particular moment that was kind of the start of the change of everything for me. It was a very big moment for me, although it was also very small. So this video talks about eating disorder recovery, alludes to unconventional support and lifestyle, and it touches on time in hospitals and with eating disorder services. These are not including explicit details, no numbers, no instructions for anything harmful. Please do take care of yourself and pause if you need to. The full story of the last 5 years is going to be put up in another video, probably my next video. So without mentioning the context, it might be quite hard for me to talk about, but at the same time, I'm hoping that that means that I will be able to really focus on the moment and not get tied up in explaining other details of my life at the time. This moment that I'll be talking about, I think, matters enough to stand alone without having that pull the focus away. For me, recovery didn't begin in hospital or in therapy. It began with something as small as a rocket lolly. I was in hospital for a very, very long time. What I mean by that is I was also in and out of hospital for a long time. So sometimes I was in for months in acute inpatient wards for people with eating disorders, as well as in general hospitals. And I was sometimes in for years. At one point I was in a residential type place for people with treatment-resistant eating disorders and anorexia. So I effectively felt like progress was impossible. I tried and tried and tried to recover over and over and over again, and I was just left feeling like it was never going to happen for me. And I knew that I would keep fighting for it. I knew that I wanted to recover. I knew that I would keep trying, but I didn't think it would ever actually happen. And there was a few times where people were almost discharging me because they were saying I just wasn't responding to treatment. And each time I would say, no, I really will try. If you do this, I don't know how I'm going to survive. I had had a lot of near-death experiences, and I was terrified. I was terrified that if I couldn't recover alone, goodness knows what would happen if I had no one supporting me, no one chasing me about blood tests or whatever else. I was terrified. So each time I said, I will do whatever I can. I will do any treatment. I want to try day patient again. I want to try inpatient. I'll gain weight. I will do anything. Please. And we got to a point that eventually, and I did another day patient admission. It was shortly after this that I said, okay, you're right. I've been in adult services for 10 years. I was in child services before that for years, and I'm not getting better. And I want to, but maybe someone else needs this space. So before that, in a kind of last-ditch attempt, I thought I would try handling my depression. I spoke to the consultant and I tried a couple of different medications. However, I was under the belief that I had depression, mostly from a particular person telling me that I did. Moving on from that, I don't believe that I actually did have depression, but throughout my life I was in very, very chaotic situations, very, very stressful situations, and I was continuing to be in a stressful situation at that point. So I was trying different depression medications, and of course they didn't work, they didn't help me. And so I agreed to be discharged. I was only seeing the consultant and the service to get those medications, and I reached a point that I said, okay, I think I just need to be discharged now. So eventually I decided, after all the medication that I tried after being discharged, I would be open to trying alternative methods. I didn't know. I was hopeless, I was exhausted, and I was certain that I would just never recover. But I was also desperate to try anything. So that brings me up to the moment, really, which is when I was in a very kind of altered mindset, I started to notice things about others. I started kind of really noticing that everybody just ate their food and kept it down, and it was like a slide. They just didn't think about it. They moved on to the next food, and it was like the last one didn't even happen. They didn't even necessarily remember what they ate over a whole day. Insane to me at the time. And I realised how whenever I tried to challenge my behaviours and I would think, okay, the key is not to do these things, and those steps would feel so big and so impossible and so much like I just couldn't even consider them. Like I knew these steps and I couldn't. But what I did start to notice was also that I couldn't just eat something. I would often, for example, tense a lot, almost trying to reject the food I was eating, almost lining myself up to certain behaviours. And so I reached a point in that moment that I started talking this all through, crying my eyes out and being like, I kind of want to try something now without doing that. I want to try something without setting myself up to fail. Because this was the thing, I was always thinking about how could I be better with this? How can I manage this many meals or whatever else? And yet I was also setting myself up in other ways to fail at doing those things. So then I wouldn't even try doing those things because I knew that these other things were going to stop me getting there. But it was a subconscious thought. All I knew was, I just can't do that. I thought, while recognizing all these little things that I did, you know what, I want to try just like a food. I want to actually push myself here and try something without tensing, without doing this. I want it to be like something that I just practice, that it comes, it goes in, it ends, it's done. And someone who I cared about a great deal amount at the time said, ice lolly? And I was just like, okay. And that was the first time I said yes to something like that in a very, very, very long time. I can't even remember if I said yes to something like that before. I cannot remember saying yes. And so they got me this ice lolly, and I sat there still talking through everything. It took me a little while to actually start eating it, and then it was melting, so I acted quite fast. It was a rocket lolly, and it was on the 8th of September in 2024. I did it. I did it, and I had only a stick remaining, and I still have the stick. The next day, I thought, I really need for that not to have just been a fluke. I need for it to continue. I need for this to be a real change. And I tried having some toast with some peanut butter, and I just kept focusing on it. I wrote about the moment. I did everything I could to just keep hold of that feeling, keep stretching this out. This is something that hasn't happened for years. This needs to happen again. And it wasn't magic, but it was the first crack in a really heavy wall. I didn't suddenly love food or my body. I just stopped fighting the idea that I actually could live. And I realised how much I had been in quasi-recovery so many times. I was begging to recover. I was also in quasi-recovery where I wanted to recover, but I thought, oh, well, it's okay. As long as I eat enough, I can cut out all of these types of foods. As long as I'm making sure I'm getting enough, it's fine. And it was not fine. The obsession with what I thought was health, the obsession with what I thought was good and bad food, was keeping me locked into my illness. And there was no justification that was, but this is recovery. It wasn't. And so I started setting myself little goals. So for the very, very first couple of weeks, it was just don't tense. Just don't tense when I eat. And every 2 weeks, I would add another goal. And I am planning on doing a video in the future about some of the habits, the everyday habits that I added in and started practicing doing for a couple of weeks before I would add in another one. And bit by bit, I broke down my eating disorder. At the beginning, it was still really hard, even adding these habits in, even practicing the things that I did, trying to decide on foods and trying to recover in the midst of a lot of different pressures was an absolute nightmare. But I knew that recovery was a full-time job, and I treated it that way, that every single second of the day I needed to choose to keep focused on recovery, to keep trying to recover no matter what was going on. I reached out to an eating disorder or eating difficulty peer support network, and I started volunteering for them, including doing monthly groups, buddying, running the Facebook, things like that. At the same time, I was rebuilding my life anyway. And eventually, amongst a lot of other changes and a lot of other recovery I was doing and healing from other things, as of September, a couple of months ago now, I reached 1 year in remission from my eating disorder, which is something I did not think I would ever, ever be able to do. And so I'm talking about a huge moment, and I could talk about it for a very long time, much longer than this. I'm trying to keep down to the bare bones of it. But ultimately, I hope that I can share the lessons that I learned over the last year and since then, and will continue learning. And I hope that I can help people to feel like recovery is possible. That even after years and years and years of feeling completely beyond help, and most people don't have a dramatic moment. And if you haven't had yours, that doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. For me, it started with an ice lolly. And maybe your moment will be something small as well, and that's completely okay. And I think that is probably all I can say about it. There is a lot more, but slowly, I will try my best to help everywhere I can.